This video is sponsored by Card Kingom. You can visit their store by using my referral link in the description below. Hi everyone, I'm Hone, and it's time for another MTG Top 10, the series where I rank cards based on their historical performance at Magic's highest level of competition. Today we're going to take a look at the Surveil mechanic. Before we get started, I want to let you know about a new perk for channel members. YouTube recently made it very easy to post videos for channel members only, and you can schedule them for regular publication at the same time. So now, channel members get to see my videos a day before everyone else. So if you'd like to support the channel and also get early access to my content, consider being a channel member. You can find out how to do so in the description. Alright, let's get back to the video. Surveil lets you look at some number of cards on top of your library. You can put each of those cards either back on top in any order or into your graveyard. In other words, it's a more graveyard-oriented version of Scry. It not only gives you card selection, allows you to fill your graveyard for value. Surveil made its debut as a keyword in 2018's Guilds of Ravnica, where it appeared as the Dimir mechanic in the set. Then in 2022, the mechanic was granted deciduous status, which means that it can potentially appear on cards in any set. Since then, most sets have at least one card that use it. For example, Lost Caverns of Ixalan has one card that uses the mechanic, Starving Revenant. This deciduous status also means they went back and changed the Oracle text for all cards that had the effect, so that they now have Surveil. Now that they've done that, the oldest card with Surveil is technically Think Tank, which was printed way back in 2001's Odyssey. As such, some of the cards on this list don't have the word Surveil in the text box on the printed card, but trust me, every card on it has Surveil according to the current Oracle text. And that's what a card had to do to be eligible for this list, have Surveil in the Oracle text. In all, there were 68 cards that met this requirement, and in this video we'll look at the 10 that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. As we'll see, this list is surprisingly stacked for an effect that appears on so few cards. Before we get started, here's a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. A first tier top 8 is worth 2 points, this includes events like Pro Tours, and a second tier top 8 is worth 1 point, this includes events like Regional Championships. Alright, let's take a look at the top 10 cards with Surveil. At number 10, it's Doom Whisperer. For 3 generic and 2 black, it is a 6/6 with flying and trample, and you can pay 2 life to Surveil 2. This Nightmare Demon has impressive stats, but maybe the most impressive thing is its ability to mill a huge chunk of your library for no mana at all. This means that even if your opponent tries to deal with this scary threat, you can just mill your library in response, and obviously if you're playing it, you've got reasons for doing that. In Standard, it was played in Golgari aggro decks, and in both Standard and Historic, it's been played in Sultai control decks. These are all decks with healthy graveyard sub-themes. More recently, it's been played in Greasefang decks and Pioneer, which look to quickly mill powerful vehicles and reanimate them with Greasefang. Doom Whisperer gives the deck another threat, while also enabling the reanimation of insane vehicles. It's likely to gain more points going forward, but as more and more cards with Surveil are printed, it is possible that it won't be able to keep up. At number 9, it's Discovery Dispersal. This is a split card, which means that you can choose to cast one half or the other. This qualifies for the list as a result of the Discovery side, which is a sorcery that costs 1 generic and a blue-black hybrid mana. It surveils 2, and then draws you a card. The Dispersal half is an instant that costs 3 generic, a blue, and a black, and it bounces your opponent's most expensive non-land permanent to their hand, and then they discard a card. While neither half of this is super efficient for what they are, the modality this offers is very nice. When the Dispersal half is good, it can be really good, and when it's bad, well, you can just cast a decent draw spell. While in Standard, it was played in Izzet spell decks as well as Sultai control. It was also played in Dimir inverter decks and Pioneer, but since that deck got banned into Oblivion in 2020, it hasn't found a home in any other formats. At number 8, it is Otherworldly Gaze. This card doesn't do anything but Surveil, but it's really good at it. For 1 blue mana, it surveils 3, and it has flashback for 1 generic and a blue, which means you can cast it from your graveyard for that cost and then exile it. In other words, this one card can put up to 6 cards into your graveyard, and if you mill it with some other effects, it still has the ability to mill even more directly from the graveyard. It's one of the most efficient ways to mill yourself in Pioneer, and as a result has seen a ton of play there in a variety of graveyard decks. Some of these decks are all about Atraxa Grand Unifier and cheating it into play. Others are spell decks that look to abuse Arclight Phoenix, which is great with the Gaze, because the Phoenix likes being in the graveyard and likes it when you cast multiple spells, and it's not very hard for a single Gaze to get cast twice in a single turn. It's even been good enough for dredge decks in Modern and Legacy, and it's well positioned to gain more points in the future. At number 7, it is Master of Death. This 3/1 costs 1 generic, a blue, and a black, and when it enters the battlefield, it surveils 2. If it's in your graveyard at the beginning of your upkeep, you can pay 1 life to return it to your hand. So, like Otherworldly Gaze, this does stuff with the graveyard, and it likes being in the graveyard too. The Master is from Modern Horizons 2, which means the only 60 card formats it's ever been legal in are Modern, Legacy, and Vintage. Of those, Vintage is the one where it's had the most success, by far. Since being printed in 2021, it's become a fixture in that format's Bazaar aggro decks. These decks look to use Bazaar of Baghdad to discard a whole bunch of cards for value. The Master, alongside Squee, fits really well in the deck because discarding them is only temporary, and you can keep discarding them to the Bazaar's effect every turn while effectively just netting cards. Master of Death also has a single point in Legacy, which it picked up in a 4-color control deck with a healthy graveyard sub-theme. Master of Death is likely to gain more points going forward. At number 6, it's Sinister Sabotage. For 1 generic and 2 blue, this counters a spell and you Surveil 1. A 3-mana counterspell isn't amazing, but tacking Surveil onto it is a pretty nice upgrade. If you're a graveyard deck, it can be really good, but even if you aren't, that kind of card selection feels quite good when you're countering a spell at the same time. Unsurprisingly, it's been played in control decks in both Standard and Pioneer, and it's likely to gain more points going forward. Number 5, it's Thought Erasure. For a blue and a black, this sorcery makes your opponent reveal their hand, and they discard a non-land card of your choice, and then you Surveil 1. Getting that Surveil after getting a good look at your opponent's hand and taking away their best card is pretty nice, because you have a pretty good idea of what you'd like to have on top of your library in that situation. Erasure has been played in control decks in Standard and Pioneer, while also making appearances in combo decks in the latter format. It's a pretty good way to make sure the coast is clear before you combo off, while also digging a little deeper in your library. It's in a good position to gain more points in the future. At number 4, it's Grim Flayer. For 1 black and 1 green, the Flayer is a 2/2 Trampler, and if you have 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, it's a 4/4 Trampler. It can help set up those cards in the graveyard all on its own, because whenever it deals combat damage to your opponent, you Surveil 3. So in the ideal situation, Grim Flayer is an insanely efficient creature that gives you great card selection and can stock your graveyard. That's amazing value for only 2 mana. Delirium decks were big in Standard when he was there, and he helped them be one of the best decks in the format. The Flayer has also seen sporadic play in Pioneer Delirium, and in Modern, he was once played in Modern aggro decks that made heavy use of the graveyard, like Death's Shadow, but he hasn't gained a single point since 2020, and it seems destined to end up at a lower slot on this list in the future. At number 3, it's Search for Azcanta. For 1 generic and a blue, you get a legendary enchantment that lets you Surveil 1 at the beginning of your upkeep. Then, if you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard, which it can help you do, thanks to Surveil, it transforms into Azcanta Sunken Ruin, a legendary land that can tap for blue, and you can also pay 2 generic and a blue to look at the top 4 of your library, and you can reveal a non-creature, non-land card and put it into your hand, while the rest go to the bottom of your library. That's a pretty amazing mana sink that is going to basically always net you a very real card. Search has primarily been played in control decks, which makes sense, as those decks run very few creatures, can make the game go long enough to easily transform Search, and they are basically guaranteed to hit a card every time they activate the land. It's been a fixture in Standard, Modern, and Pioneer control decks, and it's found some success in Legacy Miracles too. These decks are the best at actually getting value out of the Search for Azcanta side, because they seek to cast cards for their miracle cost, which you can only do if they're the first card you draw in a turn, and Search lets you manipulate the top of your library enough to increase the chances of making that happen. It's going to keep gaining points in the future. At number 2, it's Dragon's Rage Channeler. For 1 red, it's a 1/1, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you Surveil 1. That's great because it also has Delirium. It becomes a 3/3 flyer that attacks each combat if you get those 4 permanent types into your graveyard. The Channeler is from Modern Horizons 2, and that means it was never legal in Standard or Pioneer, but it has done a lot of work in other formats. It was also printed on Magic Arena, so it's legal in Historic, a format where it's done a lot of work alongside Arclight Phoenix. The two go great together because they both love spells and have graveyard-related effects. In Modern, it's played in spell decks alongside Murktide Regent, and in Legacy, you can often find it alongside Delver of Secrets. In Delver decks, it provides you with a second 1-mana 3-power flyer, and the Surveil can also help you transform Delver. So in other words, it's a key card in blue-red spell decks in 3 different formats, and that's something that's going to continue. But the card in front of it has a big lead, and it's also still being played, so number 2 may be the best Dragon's Rage Channeler can ever do. And that number 1 card is Consider. For 1 blue, this instant surveils 1, and then draws you a card. That means this one card can very efficiently put up to 2 cards into your graveyard while also replacing itself. It turns out that when a spell is this efficient and helps you load the graveyard, it's a card that's highly sought after in all of Magic's formats. It's played in many of the same decks as Dragon's Rage Channeler, as decks that can also get value out of the fact that it's a spell, or where things can really get crazy. It's even still in Standard right now, so it's definitely going to add to its score going forward, and it's hard to imagine any other Surveil card doing as much as Consider has, so it's going to remain number 1 on this list for the foreseeable future. So, those are the top 10 cards with Surveil. If you'd like to do some surveillance, check out the description where you can find a direct Card Kingdom link for each card that appeared in the video. If you want to make sure you catch future videos, don't forget to subscribe. If you want to catch up on past videos, you should see some playlists on your screen shortly. And if you want to go the extra mile in supporting me and the channel while getting some nice perks, you can become a channel member or a patron. You can find ways to do those things in the description. Thanks for watching.